My name is Zach, and I'm one of the pastors here at Restore. We're a church where anyone has a seat at the table and everyone can experience the extravagant love of Jesus. So no matter who you are, what you've done, or where you are in your spiritual journey, you are not just welcome here, you are wanted here. If that sounds like a community that you'd like to be a part of, we would love for you to join in. We have Sunday gatherings, Restore groups, and volunteer opportunities, both here in Austin and through our online community made up of folks living all over the place. You can visit our website at restoreaustin.org, or you can find us on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook to learn more and get connected. Now, if you want to dive deeper into specific topics like racial justice or biblical interpretation, LGBTQ+ inclusion, deconstruction, or much more, we have a great resource list at restoreaustin.org/resources. Now, I hope you enjoy this week's message. Back in May of 2018, when Restore was just 2 years old, me and our kids and family pastor, Sonia, were talking about community partnerships and how we wanted to be more connected with a bunch of different nonprofits. We had 2 or 3 nonprofit partners already in the first couple of years, but we were at a place where the church was growing. We're looking to expand those partnerships. And we identified this organization called SAFE, which is still one of our partners who's here today, as an organization we really wanted to figure out if we could partner with. And so we reached out and asked if we could get a meeting with someone. And we went over to Cherrywood Coffee House, if you know where that's at, on the east side of downtown. And we met this person named Lindsay Contreras, and never met her before. She was intense, I'm gonna be honest with you. She was intense. She was very much like, okay, listen, like we've had some bad experiences with church partners before, like coming in and saying that they're just gonna serve a meal, but it's like, you gotta hear a gospel presentation first, you gotta receive Christ before you can get this food. And I was just like, listen, I promise we're not gonna do that. Like that is not who we are. And so we had this really great conversation, talked through everything. And then I remember we get to the end and it felt like Lindsay was like stalling a little bit, toward the end of the conversation. And then she finally took this breath and she said, all right, I'm gonna take my SAFE hat off, which she did not have an actual hat on, but she did the little thing. And she said, I'm just gonna, be a person for a second and not affiliated with the organization. And like your church, I looked you up on the website and I watched your welcome video and I read a bunch of stuff. Like, are you for real? Like, is this for real? Like you're like a safe place where people can doubt and ask questions. You're like fully inclusive of all different kinds of folks. You are Jesus-centered, but you're just as focused. Like, is it for real? Like, I don't believe it, basically, is what she was saying. And I was like, I looked at Sonia like, oh, what have we gotten ourselves into? And I was like, no, we are for real, I promise. And you should come check it out. And she was like, well, we've had some tough church experiences. And if you've heard Lindsay preach before, she's talked about that. And me and my family, and we were looking for a place and we don't really have one right now. And it seems like Restore is too good to be true. But if it's not, we're gonna come, we're gonna check it out, and we're gonna see. And so they came and they joined, and then a couple of years ago, she became our executive pastor and has been doing a phenomenal job. And so, you can clap for Lindsay, absolutely. I tell you that story because I want you to know that partnerships have been at the center of our church community since day one. And not just our church community, but for 2,000 years, when the church has been at its best, we've been known by our sacrificial love of people. Like in the 4th century, there was this Roman emperor named Julian, and he wrote this: "For it is disgraceful that the impious Galileans," that was what he called Christians, "support not only their own poor, but ours as well. All men see our people lack aid from us." This was the Roman emperor writing to a trusted advisor and saying, early Christians are taking such good care of people, it's embarrassing us. Like, we need to take better care of people too. The early church embarrassed the Roman Empire into taking better care of people. What if the American church did the same? What if we cared for people so well, especially folks on the margin, that we inspired others to join in and do the same thing? Well, that's what we've been trying to do here at Restore for almost a decade. And we have a very specific strategy for doing this. It's called partnerships, and it's one of our core values from the very beginning. If you go to our website, you'll see it right there on the Who We Are page. Restore mobilizes volunteers and funding to work with organizations who are already doing an amazing job helping people in need in our community and around the world. One of our 4 core values is partnerships. Now, obviously, nonprofit organizations haven't always been around, but partnering together to support people in need is something that Christians have always done. Putting our faith into tangible practice has been a core value of Christ followers since the first century. But far too often, 21st century Christian responses to significant societal problems are some version of like thoughts and prayers, you know? But that isn't what the early Christians believed or what they practiced. In fact, I talked about this at length last Sunday, but Jesus and his earliest followers were all about putting their faith into action, especially on behalf of people who were in need. Jesus said things like, "You will know my followers by the fruit they produce, by the love, joy, peace, patience, kindness that they engender in themselves and in the world." He said, "Not everyone who says to me, 'Lord, Lord,' will enter the kingdom of heaven, but those who do the will of my Father," those who put their faith into practice. And he said, it's not enough just to hear these words that I'm saying. You have to be people who put them into action. James, the brother of Jesus, put it like this: "Do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourselves. Do what it says. What good is it, my brothers and sisters, if someone claims to have faith but has no deeds? Can such faith save them? Suppose a brother or a sister is without clothes and daily food. If one of you says to them, 'Go in peace, keep warm and well fed,' but does nothing about their physical needs, what good is it? In the same way, faith by itself, if not accompanied by action, is dead." I believe that far too often, the American church has seen people without clothes and daily food and said, "Go in peace, keep warm, be well fed." When we provide only lip service to helping meet needs, no one gets helped. And then everyone just assumes that we are hypocrites. We talk about following the Jesus who healed the sick and fed the hungry and welcomed the outcast and set the captives free, but we don't actually do it, not in any meaningful way. To paraphrase James, if we say, "God bless you, I'll be praying," but do nothing to meet someone's tangible needs, what good is it? In fact, what I argued last Sunday was that it's not just like neutral, it's actually negative. It actually reinforces these hypocritical stereotypes that so many churches carry, so many Christians carry. When we talk about Jesus, but we don't do the work of Jesus, we are giving people an inaccurate picture of who Jesus really is. But when faith is accompanied by action, it comes alive like never before. My friend Will recently told me a story about when he worked with refugees fleeing political violence. And even though he was with a Christian organization, the main thing they focused on was meeting the basic needs of folks in this refugee camp. And when a fellow worker asked his leader why they weren't sharing the gospel more, she replied, "We are sharing the gospel through food and clothing and shelter and healthcare and hygiene. And after we do all that, maybe we can share the gospel with words too." So that's what Will and his group did. They met people's needs. And then one day, after sharing a meal with a group of refugees, one of them turned to Will and said, "You're a Christian, aren't you?" Will said, "Yeah. Why do you ask?" And the man responded by telling Will some of his story. He'd been through more in the last few months than most of us will endure an entire lifetime. Along the way, he'd stopped believing in God. He'd been convinced that there was no deity in the world that could have allowed what had happened to him to happen. But then he arrived at the refugee camp and met people from Will's group. He got food and water and a safe place to sleep and medicine for his wounds and care for his children. And then he said something that Will told me he has never, ever forgotten. He turned to Will and he said, "God found me in this camp. Sometimes my head still struggles to believe in God, but my stomach knows that he's real. Sometimes my head still struggles to believe in God, but when I sit here with a full belly, when I look out and I see my kids taken care of, when I get to go home to actual shelter instead of this nomadic living and fleeing, I know that God's real." Mahatma Gandhi famously said, "There are people in the world so hungry that God cannot appear to them except in the form of bread." The work we do to support people in need is gospel work. It is the work of Jesus. Don't let anybody tell you different. I know that because Jesus himself outlined it as his work when he preached his very first recorded sermon. He said, "The Spirit of the Lord is on me because he has anointed me to proclaim the gospel, the good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim freedom for the prisoners and recovery of sight for the blind and to set the oppressed free and to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." Jesus didn't come to pass out gospel tracts. He came to live a gospel life. He came to demonstrate the good news of God's love for humanity with word and deed. And we at Restore do this Jesus work in a number of different ways. We have some internal mechanisms like our benevolence team that helps meet basic needs for those connected to our community. We have our care and compassion team that work to support people going through difficult times all around the city. But we've also formed these partnerships with these nonprofits in Austin and around the world. And partnerships are so important for two main, very practical reasons. Number one, partnerships allow us to demonstrate the love of Jesus, to share the gospel, the tangible gospel outside the walls of the church. It's awesome, and I love that we come together on Sundays and we talk and we sing and we laugh and we encourage each other and we hug and we go through hard times and good times together. But if that's all our Christianity ever is, an hour and a half on a Sunday, then it's empty. If our faith in Jesus does not push us out into the world, in our families, in our jobs, in our communities to care for people in need, it's empty. Partnerships allow us to do that. And number two, partnerships allow us to more effectively do this gospel work, meet tangible needs, because of the resources and expertise of our partners. Now, a lot of churches will kind of start their own ministries, and I get it, and I think a lot of times it's really beautiful. So like, for instance, you may have a church that says, okay, we have a lot of people experiencing homelessness in our city, and so we're gonna start a ministry out of our church for people that are experiencing homelessness. And honestly, best case scenario, they just don't do much harm, Because the reality is, most people that are in churches or on staff with churches don't know anything about ministry to people experiencing homelessness. And so they try, they might do the best they can. They pour a ton of resources into it a lot of times, but they don't know best practices. They don't know how to engage. They don't know nonprofits that are doing the work in the city already. At best, they're replicating services. At worst, they're doing harm because they don't know what they're doing. These partnerships allow us to take what we have, which is people and financial resources and volunteer hours, and mobilize it with an organization like Mobilizes and Fishes, who's been doing this in incredible ways for so long. We get to partner and use their expertise and be a part of their work and actually do real tangible good. That's why we do partnerships. All of this is why, since before we even officially launched Restore almost 9 years ago this month, we've been mobilizing volunteers and funding to community partners. And I'm excited that you are gonna get to hear from 8 of them today. So I'm gonna invite Pastor Lindsay, who leads all of our partnerships, ironically, and all of our partners to go ahead and come up on stage. And you're gonna get to hear from them. Would you give them a round of applause real quick? I just want to say one last thing as they make their way up here. And that is, I get texts and calls from you guys and so many other people almost every day of the week, especially over the last few months, saying I want to do something, Like I want to help. I want to make a real tangible difference in the world, and I don't know how to do it. I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. And one of the reasons that we have these partners is so that you can be a part of doing some really, really good work. You can channel that energy into something really beneficial, which is the work that they're all doing. Lindsay, you got it.